Is this person? Before we go to the next session of the setting up the scene according to the program, please allow me to have another fraternal greeting from the Muslim International, from the International Union of Muslim Scholars. This is from the one and only Dr. Ibrahim Farouk El Zayed. I hope I had it right. Please welcome him on stage. You can come this side. Oh, you're very tall.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Mr. President Thabo Mbeki, Minister of Internal Affairs, Naleda Pandor, former Minister, Prime Minister of Turkey, Ahmed Davutoglu, Minister of Justice, Namibia, Ministers, Excellencies, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, dear sisters and brothers in humanity, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. On behalf of the International Union of Muslim Scholars and his President, Eminent Sheikh Professor Dr. Ali Al-Qurradaghi, who pitifully has been forced to cancel his travel last minute for health issues, we came to support and to congratulate the South African Anti-Apartheid Steering Committee for this first global anti-apartheid conference for Palestine here today in Johannesburg. We strongly encourage this pivotal conference that responds to calls from Palestinians inside and outside to address Israel's ongoing genocidal action against Palestinians, especially in Gaza, even now, while we are gathered here. This conference will globally support the Palestinian people and the struggle against Israel's apartheid settler colonial regime. It is an important step to hold Israel accountable for its crimes against the Palestinian people. This conference should help to work on strategies isolating Israel's regime of oppression and to foster global solidarity and action that will support the struggle of the Palestinian people for all the rights, including the right of self-determination and the right to return. Today, a good number of Muslim scholars, leaders, and activists drawn from different parts of the world gathered in South Africa to represent the International Islamic Scholars and Leaders Thanksgiving mission to South Africa in response to the duty outlined
يا نبي سلام عليك، يا رسول سلام عليك، يا حبيب سلام عليك، صلوات الله عليك. يا نبي سلام عليك، يا رسول سلام عليك، يا حبيب سلام عليك، صلوات الله عليك. يا نبي سلام عليك، يا رسول سلام عليك، يا حبيب سلام عليك، صلوات الله عليك. يا نبي سلام عليك، يا رسول سلام عليك، يا حبيب سلام عليك، صلوات الله عليك.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media.
لا تقل لوحدي أو كيف السبيل.
Humanity sets the agenda.
تصنع المستحيل.
मेरी झोली को भर दे खुदा.
African components of the Ummah to be mindful of God's warning when making pivotal governance decisions and political choices. Because God tells us, do not take my enemies and your enemies as your friends and protectors, offering them your love. Fourth, we recognize the many disappointments experienced by the South African community as citizen. However, we urge South African people to prioritize the ongoing efforts by the ruling party for Palestine, but also in building a society free of corruption, violence, and inequality. And fifth and last, we call on all leaders present to amplify this message on every platform and every occasion in every country and nation. Let the call for peace, justice, and human rights reverberate through every medium and channel, reaching all people by the will of God. And God knows best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Before we go, as we go to the next session, I will now, before I hand over to my colleague Noor, I am instructed to remind that we do have a hashtag, we're moving with the times. So on all platforms, please do follow us. It's hashtag Palestine Africa 2024. Hashtag Palestine Africa 2024. This needs to be known. We are working on a movement, so we move with the times. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Program Director. My name is Noor Niftaquddin. I'm a member of the PSC in Gauteng, and I'm proud to say also of the Wits University Palestine Action Committee, where we're hoping possibly the first encampment will materialize over the next few days. I was asked to chair this session because I am an historian by profession, and historians, Mohammed Dango, are the architects of time, and we know how to keep time. We are under enormous pressure. As you all know, the session was meant to start at 11:15 till 1 o'clock. So we're running behind time very seriously. President Mbeki, I was going to regale you with a scintillating introduction for half an hour, but I'm giving up. And all I'm doing is saying all protocols observed. And then I'm going to please ask our speakers to come to the front. We have a really wonderful panel of speakers, all of whom have played leading roles as activists, as political leaders in their various jurisdictions and also globally in mobilizing support for the Palestinian cause and in shining a very bright light on the settler colonial regime of apartheid Israel. It's impossible for me, because it would take a very long time, properly to introduce all of the speakers. I'm therefore going to do abbreviated one-line introductions. I've also asked all of the speakers, and this is really the most difficult challenge, to try and keep their introductions to between 10 and 13, 14 minutes. But I recognize there's going to be some negotiation up at the podium. So if you see me start kind of shoving little pieces of paper in front of them, it's only to remind them of the time. I want to, before I introduce the speakers very briefly, just to echo Minister Pandor's statement, that it's really important as we gather here to remind ourselves that as egregious as the genocide over the last 7 months has been, the ongoing Nakba, the ethnic cleansing, has been going on for a long time, since at least 1948, but the settler colonial regime has been perpetrating violence against Palestinian people for more than 100 years. At the center of what we need to consider as we mobilize renewed international solidarity is that Palestinian people have resisted settler colonialism from day one. They have been and remain at the center of resistance. And as was the case in South Africa, the international solidarity movement must recognize the centrality and the leadership of the Palestinian people and their resistance. We gather here to be part and to stand with the Palestinians in their resistance. That is, for me, a fundamental principle from which any international solidarity must start from. As I said, we have a stellar list of panelists. I am going to very briefly introduce the speakers who I think most of you don't need introductions on. But you also need to know who is going to be addressing you. I'll do very brief introductions and then ask the speakers to come up in this order. Our first speaker from Palestine, an international leader of the Palestinian resistance and of the global solidarity, is Mustafa Barghouti, who is the General Secretary of the Palestine National Initiative. He'll be followed by Declan Kerney, who was introduced previously, who is the National Chairman of Sinn Féin. Our third speaker is Salah Hiji, who was a regional director of Amnesty International and the co-author of a very important report by Amnesty International on apartheid Israel. Our fourth speaker is Lamis Deek, who is a well-known human rights advocate based in New York. Our final speaker is Ronnie Kasrils, who I think everyone here knows, was a leading figure in the South African liberation movement and a member, a minister in the democratic government after 1994. With those very, very brief introductions, I'm going to ask Mustafa to address us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable President Mbeki, our friend, Honorable Palestinian and South African Minister, Naledi Pandor. We consider you the Minister of Freedom. Honorable Prime Minister Daoud Oglo, my friend Declan from Sinn Féin, Honorable Minister of Justice in Namibia, and Honorable Minister from Bolivia, and Honorable Ambassadors who are present here today, our South African and global comrades and activists, our esteemed Palestinian leaders, comrades, activists, especially those who came from Palestine, I greet you all today. And on behalf of our Palestinian people, I would like to thank all the people in solidarity with Palestine, and especially thank the South African Anti-Apartheid Steering Committee for organizing this wonderful conference, which I am sure will be the beginning, the spark of the creation of a global anti-apartheid movement for Palestine that is no less active, that will be no less effective than the anti-apartheid movement against apartheid in South Africa. And our biggest greetings today is to our people in Palestine, especially to our people in Gaza, and especially now to our people in Rafah who are enduring terrible attacks and massacres by the Israeli army. While we are meeting here today, I've just been speaking to our people in Rafah. They are subjected to terrible bombardment. 1,300,000 people don't know where to go. This is a horrible, horrible massacre that is happening in front of the whole world. And what's happening in Gaza, with American support and with the complicity of many Western governments, is a terrible crime that nobody should accept and nobody should live with. 3 war crimes at the same time in parallel: the war crime of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and collective punishment. It is unacceptable to forget that we've lost up till now no less than 44,000 Palestinian souls, including around 10,000 who are still missing under the rubble. Among them, no less than 17,000 children and 10,000 women. 492 of my colleagues, doctors, nurses, health professionals. 141 journalists. In addition to no less than 80,000 people who were injured, many of whom will not live because they do not have medical care, because Israel destroyed most medical facilities in Gaza. These are not numbers. These are people. Each one is a story of a human being, some of whom will not continue to live to have their dreams achieved. Some of whom children who will not even have time to dream. We should all remember that these are not just numbers. And it is 124,000 people up till now. Just let me remind you, this is 5.3% of the population of Gaza. Had this happened in the United States of America, you would be talking about 18 million people killed or injured in 7 months. That is more than all Americans killed or injured in all American wars since the 18th century. A terrible destruction of all hospitals, schools, universities, kindergartens, an atrocity that we didn't see even during the Second World War, or even during the terrible time of apartheid here in South Africa. And we will not forgive. We will not forgive the fact that they tried to dehumanize us, the Palestinians, to justify all these crimes. We will not forget what they have done of field execution, putting people in concentration camps, torturing them with electrical shocks, beating and drowning them in the water. We cannot forgive that they did not allow families to bury their beloved after being killed in dignity. And this Israeli establishment is saying it all. Whether you talk about Smotrich, who said, we will not only destroy Rafah and Deir al-Balah and Nusirat, we want to remove the memory of the presence of the Canaanis, the Palestinians. And we want not only half destruction, but total and full destruction of Gaza. This is the Minister of Finance of the Israeli government. And they blame us for struggling for our rights. But this whole war brought the knowledge, brought the understanding back to the minds of every Palestinian and every human being that believes in human rights in this world. That what we face is not just occupation, it's not just a system of apartheid that is the worst in human history. It's not only the longest occupation in modern history, it's more than that. It's an evil plan for settler colonial system with genocidal intention and practice. That is what we face. And it started in the end of the 19th century, where they tried to establish an imperialist strategic base with Messianic Zionist ideology that used Jewish people for their project. That's how it is. And in 1948, you all know what they've done. When they destroyed 520 Palestinian villages, communities, and committed 52 massacres, gangs of settlers, the same type of gangs that settlers are doing now in the West Bank against the population of Palestine. 70% of the population of Palestine were displaced. And let me remind everybody that 70% of the population of Gaza were also refugees from 1948, that they are trying to displace one more time. Endless wars, 1948, 1956, 1967, 1976, 1982, 1986, 1987, 2000, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021, and now 2023 and 24. How many wars can the world allow this fascist Israeli regime to conduct against the Palestinian people? For the first time, it is clear now. Maybe we've never seen this as clearly as it is today, that this is not the struggle of the Palestinian people for freedom. It's a global struggle against injustice, against oppression, and against this terrible attacks and crimes against the Palestinian people. What we see today is regeneration of Palestinian young people, regeneration of knowledge and activism of young people all over the world, including in the United States of America. From Columbia to MIT, to Harvard, to Los Angeles, to Oxford, Cambridge, Sciences Po, Sorbonne, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Yemen, and here in Johannesburg. What we see today is the rise of a global movement in support of freedom in Palestine. And let me say that we are very proud that our people, the Palestinians, regardless of how much big price we have paid, we've awakened the people of the world against genocide, against injustice, against lies, against double standard, against the hypocrisy and racism of Western governments. And the world now must ask the question, where is international law? Where are the human rights that they've been trying to educate us about? Where is international law when the Congress of the United States of America meets to issue a law to punish the members of the International Court of Justice if they try to impose international law. Where is the international law? Friends and comrades, we are not talking about Palestine here. We are talking about the world, about the global order of the world. And it's not just Gaza. West Bank has been divided in 224 small islands. They're not even Pantustans. They're ghettos. A much smaller islands besieged and surrounded by 760 military checkpoints. Each checkpoint is a checkpoint of death for Palestinians today. By a terrible apartheid wall, by continuous attacks of gangs of settlers. And I don't need to explain to you the reality of apartheid in Palestine. You already know it. Human Rights Watch explained it. Amnesty International explained it very clearly. It is clear. But what is important to remember is what these reports said, that apartheid now is affecting not only Palestinians in the occupied territories, but also Palestinians in 1948 areas and Palestinians in the diaspora who are prevented from the right of return. Israel initiated this tragedy, initiated this war, but Israel will not be the one who decides how it ends. We will. We thank you and we thank everybody that stood with us. We thank especially South Africa. We thank the ANC and wish you success with all other parties who are against attacks on Palestinians. I can't vote, but if I could vote, I would have voted for you. But let's remember what Nelson Mandela said. You repeated already what he said, but I want to add another phrase he said, which is that the Palestinian issue today is the most important moral issue of our time. And we thank you for what you do in the ICJ. We appreciate your support. And the biggest question today for this conference, and allow me just to take 1 minute more, in addition to the other 3 minutes, is how to end this tragedy, how to end this injustice, how to bring down not only apartheid, but the whole settler colonial system. And for that, we need 4 factors, 4 pillars of struggle, if you want. The Palestinian steadfastness and resilience and staying on our land. We will not leave our land. Second, it's resistance against this injustice. We will resist injustice as much as we can. And third, Palestinian unity. Unity about a program of struggle for our freedom. And finally, you. The world movement of boycott, divestment, sanctions, and the world movement of anti-apartheid struggle. That's what we need. And this conference must put a strategy of how to build a global anti-apartheid movement and how we can together conduct an uprising of boycott, divestment, sanctions worldwide. And that requires the ability to concentrate on organization and on continuity. And most important, the unity of what we do together. Our struggle is a struggle not only against apartheid, but against injustice. And let me be clear, this is not against Jewish people. This is not against Israelis as people. It's not anti-Semitic as they claim. It's against Zionism, against racism, against chauvinism, and against white supremacy. It is a struggle in which Jewish progressive people are participating, and I thank all the Jewish people who are with us here today in this conference. Because this is not a struggle only to save Palestinian people, it is also a struggle to save Jewish people from the way they are being exploited. And from this imperialist project, it's a struggle for freedom. And in it, when I see our struggle today, and when I see all these demonstrations all over the world, I see what I have seen when I was much younger. The uprising of young people against the war on Vietnam. The uprising of the young people against apartheid in South Africa. The uprising of the young people against racism in the United States against African Americans. And the uprising of the people of Algeria and India against the colonialism of France and Britain. That's what we see. And let me tell you frankly, they will not frighten us by calling us anti-Semitic or calling us terrorists or calling us that we are not respecting humanity. We will not be frightened. And our Jewish friends here will not be frightened by calling them self-hating Jews. The reality is Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel today, is in alliance with the most anti-Semitic forces in the world, with the fascists of Europe. And Netanyahu is the greatest provocator of anti-Semitism because of the crimes he is committing. This is the truth of what's happening today. And I say to everybody in Europe, please watch out. The same mindset that allowed Holocaust against Jewish people and anti-Semitism against Jewish people in Europe is the same mindset that is allowing Holocaust against Palestinian people today. And we will not, I'm finishing, and we will not take lessons from those who committed genocide, committed Holocaust, and committed anti-Semitism in previous times. On behalf of the Palestinian people, I tell you, after 217 days of their aggression, Netanyahu and his army have failed. They could not destroy resistance. They could not bring back their prisoners without exchange. They could not impose their control over Gaza. And most importantly, they failed in achieving the most important goal of this attack, which is ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And for that, we have all to stand and greet the people of Gaza for their steadfastness. I finished. 1 minute. And finally, again, on behalf of our Palestinian people, I tell you, I promise you, we will not submit, we will not surrender, we will not be broken, and we will not give up, and nothing will stop our struggle for freedom. Till we achieve our freedom, till we achieve our justice, till we achieve our full humanity and our dignity, and we will overcome because you are with us. And we will see, Minister Pando, as your mother said, we will see freedom in Palestine in our and your lifetime. Thank you so much.
Free, free Palestine. Comrades, as you can imagine, I have a very difficult task. If all of the speakers are as wonderful as we've just heard now, I think we'd want to listen to them the whole day. So I'm going to ask for your indulgence. I am going to be a little pushier with the next speakers. We are seriously running against the clock. I have Before I ask Declan to come up to speak, I've been asked by the organizers, please, to appeal to the people who are standing. You have to sit down. The occupational security people of the venue don't want anyone standing. So please, if you can find seating, there's some empty seats around. Otherwise, I'm afraid you're going to have to sit down. I see some young people at the back, and I would imagine they don't mind sitting down. So I'm going to hand over to our next speaker, Declan. Over to you.
Comrades, friends, sisters and brothers, greetings from Ireland and from the leadership of Sinn Féin. Thank you for the invitation to participate in your conference. I've never visited South Africa before, but the historical resonance of Johannesburg in particular reverberates with me, where Nelson Mandela and Oliver Tambo established their law firm, the resting place of Joe Slovo and Chris Hani, revolutionary leaders of the armed struggle, the birthplace of Joe Modise, who not only commanded MK in the field, but managed their transition into the South African National Democratic Forces. And it is also home to my friend and comrade, Ronnie Casserols, who remains as committed to the national liberation struggle as when he joined it so many decades ago and became part of its collective leadership. I also think of Soweto, which was so central to achieving the freedom of South Africa. When democracy was finally achieved, the new Republic of South Africa and the ANC became important partners, as well as touchstones for Sinn Féin, in the development of the Irish peace process and shaping the path to Irish self-determination and national reunification of our country. The political and the fraternal links between Irish Republicans and the Palestinian national liberation cause have also existed for many, many decades. Palestinian and Irish freedom fighters shared a special bond of solidarity. The connections between South Africa's liberation struggle and Ireland are historic and endure until this day. MK and the IRA maintained close links and provided mutual support to each other. And that political and military relationship was directly overseen by Joe Slovo and Joe Modise. Sinn Féin and Irish Republicans generally were deeply committed to the campaign to end apartheid here. And Sinn Féin's commitment to our Palestinian sisters and brothers is absolute and unbreakable. Just as we stood by those who struggled against apartheid in South Africa, we remain in active support with the Palestinian people who struggle against the apartheid and illegal Zionist occupation imposed upon all of Palestine. Ours is an internationalist commitment to all of those who are struggling against repression, exploitation, and for freedom in pursuit of a better and equal and more democratic world. Whether that has been in the townships of South Africa, the refugee camps of Palestine, the mountains of the Basque Country, the Sierras of Cuba, or the barrios of Latin America. History did not commence on the 7th of October, but that date has now become a watershed, not only for Palestine itself, but for the global community. It has raised existential questions and issues for the most powerful states in this world, and for global multilateral institutions about how international law is both implemented and how the dynamics of our multipolar world are democratically managed. Friends, Israel's genocidal war against Gaza, its aggression in the West Bank, and the collective punishment and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian people has posed explicit questions, specifically for that cartel of Western governments which control the global North. The war in Gaza and continued oppression of the Palestinians has laid bare the moral hypocrisy of the big Western powers. Their stances on Palestine are absolutely untenable. From opposition and equivocation to the calling for a ceasefire, to continuing to fund and arm the Israeli war and murder machine, and refusing to enforce sanctions. These positions are absolutely incompatible with universal democratic principles, multilateralism, and peaceful coexistence. Israel's genocide, ethnic cleansing, collective punishment, and settler colonialism may yet become a seminal point for global diplomacy and how it is conducted. As an Irish Republican party, Sinn Féin is dedicated to the sovereignty of all people. That is democracy in its fullest sense. We are committed to the universality of peace, equality, social justice, national self-determination and democracy for all peoples. Our approach to international relations is governed by adherence to international law, the United Nations Charter, military neutrality and non-alignment, diplomacy, multilateralism and peaceful coexistence, and also opposition to imperialism in all of its forms. And we bring a struggle perspective to how we engage the world. I believe that national self-determination is the essential international struggle of our time. The world we live in is dominated by this issue: the national democratic struggle, the aspiration and right of peoples to determine their own destinies and relationships with other nations. And the United Nations Charter expressly establishes that right. The denial of this right goes to the heart of Israel's apartheid of and occupation in Palestine. The struggle for national self-determination in Ireland is centuries old. Just over 100 years ago, British imperialism imposed the partition of Ireland, creating a one-party apartheid state with a built-in unionist majority. But 4 years previously, the Balfour Declaration established the doctrine of a Zionist state, later to emerge as the State of Israel. Since then, the rights of Palestinians have been repeatedly subjugated by Western imperial interests and collusion with Zionist colonialism. When World War II ended in 1945, there were some 45 states in the world. Consider the straight lines on maps which marked the boundaries of most African and Asian countries. These were drawn by the rulers of European empires and 19th and 20th century colonial powers, the products of imperialism and colonialism. So Lloyd George oversaw Ireland's partition, and Balfour foreshadowed the breakup of Palestine. Throughout the 20th century, the Palestinians have been dispossessed, displaced, and exiled. Israeli state strategy systematically hollowed out the Oslo Accords. It has sought to put the prospect of Palestinian national sovereignty beyond reach. And all of this has been done with the active complicity and acquiescence of Western powers. Yet modern history has also been progressively shaped by anti-imperialist and national liberation struggles. Only 2 weeks ago, South Africa celebrated Freedom Day. 30 years ago, the National Democratic Revolution came into existence. 4 years later, in April 1988, Ireland's peace settlement, the Good Friday Agreement, was signed. The Irish peace process was formalised and a line was drawn under political conflict. A framework was negotiated to oversee the democratic reform of the northern state, and critically, the right to self-determination was built into the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement. Change has been slow and protracted. Challenges remain. But today, Ireland, especially the north, once a militarised zone, has been absolutely transformed. Constitutional change in my country is now on the political horizon. And while nothing is ever inevitable, today we are closer than ever to Irish unity. The historic changes achieved in South Africa and Ireland emerged from the changed context created by revolutionary armed struggle, which then gave way to negotiations and ultimately negotiated settlements. The 4 pillars of struggle in South Africa provided the strategic direction and cohesion for the People's War and the mass struggle to end apartheid. And the implementation of our national strategic objectives by the Sinn Féin leadership guided the Republican struggle from the era of armed struggle into multi-party talks, the achievement of the Good Friday Agreement, and it must be said, successive phases of negotiations even since then. So, comrades and friends, negotiations is a permanent site of struggle. The ANC and Sinn Féin leadership learned from and supported each other throughout all of these dramatic periods. Together, we prioritised the primacy of political strategy and leadership and the centrality of unity and cohesion among the forces of struggle. And these objectives were essential to building political strength. However, neither national democracy in South Africa or peace in Ireland would have been achieved without the development of international strategies. Both Sinn Féin and the ANC successfully internationalised our respective struggles for national democracy and self-determination. The global anti-apartheid campaign against the Afrikaner regime realigned world opinion and shifted the position of key Western powers, including the United States. In Ireland, young striking workers in the mid-1980s changed the policy of the Irish government in relation to its stance on trade with South Africa. Sinn Féin's peace strategy identified the strategic importance of the Irish diaspora in North America, and we successfully greened the White House in the early 1990s. The Good Friday Agreement itself was the result of the positive international engagement by the US, EU, Canada, South Africa, and other international stakeholders. World government and popular opinion embraced the objectives of ending apartheid in South Africa and ending the war in Ireland through a peace settlement and a negotiated process of democratic change. Friends, the war in Gaza has become a lightning rod for mobilising popular world opinion against Israel's apartheid occupation. The solidarity of ordinary people for Palestine across the globe is unprecedented. The actions of students, particularly in the US, but also in Ireland, Britain and Europe, are reminiscent of the student campaigns against the Vietnam War. And students in the United States have now ensured that Gaza and Palestine are at the heart of the US presidential election campaign. The inherent contradictions within Israeli society have never been more sharply exposed. And the groundbreaking legal action at the ICJ by South Africa is not only courageous, it has directly impacted upon the policies of other international governments. Let me say this. Even though key Western powers have taken outrageous positions in backing Israel, because it serves as a proxy to secure their security and their economic interests in the Middle East, the fact is that the West and Europe are not monolithic. In addition, clear divergences on policy towards Palestine exist within the White House, the US State Department, and the National Security Council. And all of these factors are relevant to our discussions in relation to the development of a global anti-apartheid campaign, which is now essential to achieving national democracy and self-determination for the Palestinian people. And of course, there are lessons to be applied from the international interventions which were so important in South Africa and Ireland. However, the focus of this initiative must be clearly aimed at the complete political, diplomatic and economic isolation of Israel until a complete ceasefire is achieved and the apartheid occupation is finally ended. The aim, friends, must be the delivery on the national and democratic rights of Palestinians as indemnified in international law. I believe the international landscape is changing. A properly calibrated global anti-apartheid strategy can affect and maximise opportunities within that evolving context. So, Akarja, there is now a moment. A strategic and political opportunity is emergent, and that should not be lost on the Palestinian leaderships. The South African anti-apartheid campaign provides an historic point of reference with regard to economic divestment, sanctions, diplomatic and multilateral pressure and political objectives, but that cannot be addressed in isolation from the imperative of establishing Palestinian national unity and political cohesion between all national movements and Palestinian civic society. For the success of a global campaign to be fully maximised, There must be a resolution of divisions within the Palestinian national struggle. Make no mistake, there is no alternative to an agreed national liberation strategy. The resistance and reluctance to develop a strategic consensus, to embrace political unity and provide united leadership is both a strategic failure and weakness. A united Palestinian leadership which commands overall popular support and gives positive impetus to a global anti-apartheid campaign is critical. Therefore, as I draw my remarks to a conclusion, a paradigm shift is required within the Palestinian national struggle. An integrated political strategy with properly defined objectives should be agreed and both generate and effect the political momentum within Palestine itself and internationally. Israel will never defeat the Palestinian spirit of resistance. But there is no military victory for any side. The Palestinian struggle needs to equip itself with the cohesion, capacity, and strategies to win. More of the same is no longer an option. Comrades and friends, passing the torch of struggle to future generations is not tenable. This moment must be seized. A new phase of struggle is now needed. Progressive and democratic and international pressure must be geared to introduce positive initiatives and interventions to deliver a full ceasefire, inclusive talks, followed by representative negotiations, an irreversible peace process, and the achievement of Palestinian national determination and full sovereignty. The South African Freedom Charter, the Harare Declaration, and the Good Friday Agreement are political resources which can assist with that paradigm shift. This war will eventually end. A new phase will open. The Palestinian struggle and its component leaderships need now to prepare for the negotiations table when that horizon emerges. The domestic and political international experience of Ireland and the Sinn Féin leadership is available to that end. We are committed as a party, as a struggle, to supporting the development of a global anti-apartheid campaign for Palestine, while at the same time helping to achieve national unity and the development of an agreed political strategy for national democracy and sovereignty. In conclusion, friends and comrades, Nelson Mandela Madiba spoke of the long walk to freedom. Irish Republicans say to the people of Palestine, we are with you on that long walk to freedom. We will never, ever abandon you. We see and we hear you. And inshallah, we will be finally victorious together in achieving the national and democratic rights of the Palestinian people. Amandla.
Thanks very much. Just a reminder that there is an overflow room. So for the people who may feel uncomfortable standing, please make your way. I believe it's across from this main room. Our next speaker is Salah.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellencies, comrades, greetings. I'm honored to be among you today. For over a century, we Palestinians have been struggling against Zionist colonialism, a European racist settler colonial movement intent on our elimination from our homeland, Palestine. In 1948, the Zionist movement declared the creation of the State of Israel and constituted itself as a regime of apartheid, committed to maintaining Jewish supremacy and domination in Palestine and against those it had forced out of their homes and not allowed to return until this day. Sorry. Sorry. Since then, the State of Israel has expanded its persistent colonization of Palestinian land and relentless dispossession of the Palestinian people, a dual process of land consolidation and demographic engineering that it carried out through systematic murder, detention, torture, ethnic cleansing, and persecution. This colonial violence has come to its peak with the first live-streamed genocide against the 2.3 million Palestinians in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip that continues as we speak, supported by the US, the United Kingdom, and Germany, among other Western powers. Let us be clear. Israel is an apartheid state with full control over all of Palestine, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, persecuting us in our homeland and in exile. At the heart of this settler colonial regime is the intention of eliminating us, the indigenous Palestinians, from our homeland. Today, Israeli politicians and leaders promise to achieve their intentions, to bring the Nakba to full circle by committing genocide in Gaza. We have been standing in the face of this brutal oppression and genocide for too long. But with every escalation of colonial violence, we dig our roots of belonging, of identity, of resistance deeper. I recall Mahmoud Darwish's poem, The Second Olive Tree, and I'll read part of it. He says, "The olive tree is the color of peace, if peace needed a color. No one says the olive tree to the olive tree, how beautiful you are, but how noble and how splendid. And she who teaches soldiers to lay down their rifles and re-educates them in the tenderness and humility, go home and light your lamps with my oil. But these soldiers, these modern soldiers, besiege her with bulldozers and uproot her from her lineage of earth. They vanquished our grandmother who foundered, her branches on the ground, her roots in the sky. She did not weep or cry out, but one of her grandsons, who witnessed the execution, threw a stone at a soldier, and he was martyred with her. After the victorious soldiers had gone on their way, we buried him there in the deep pit, their grandmother's cradle. And that is why we were sure that he would become, in a little while, an olive tree, a thorny olive tree, and green." Omar Barghouti, the co-founder of the BDS movement, said once that Palestinians have learned the hard way that unless we clearly define ourselves, our oppression, and our aspirations, the hegemonic oppressor will do it for us, dehumanizing us, demonizing us, erasing our history and our present to make it easier to eliminate us. We refuse to be defined, we refuse to be confined by oppressors to the mortifying choice between being uprooted, subjugated, or annihilated. We refuse this choice, and we have been for over 100 years. We will continue despite the adverse conditions. We are the olive trees that define the Palestinian landscape. We define ourselves, our oppression, and what we will do in the face of calamity. In 1965, Palestinian scholar Faiz Sayegh penned the book Zionist Colonialism, where he theorized about Zionist settler colonialism and apartheid. He called for understanding Zionist colonialism as racial elimination rather than racial domination. He says that the Zionist settler learned all the lessons which the various discriminatory regimes of white settler states in Asia and Africa can teach it, and have surpassed its teachers. For whereas the Afrikaner apostles of apartheid in South Africa, for example, brazenly proclaimed their sins, the Zionist practitioners of apartheid in Palestine provokingly protest their innocence. We have been standing firm in the face of apartheid when it was here in South Africa and as it continues in Palestine. Over the past 2 decades, our movement has emerged as similar and very much inspired by the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. The current Palestinian-led movement to dismantle Israel's settler colonial apartheid has its roots here in South Africa when Palestinians, some of whom are here, made the call in Durban in South Africa during the 2001 World Conference Against Racism to end Israel's brand of apartheid and other racist crimes against humanity. In 2002, Palestinian grassroots and popular resistance on the ground launched the Stop the Apartheid Wall campaign, putting Israel's apartheid wall at the center of the struggle to decolonize Palestine. 2 years later, Palestinians launched the campaign for academic and cultural boycott of Israel until it ends its occupation, colonization, and system of apartheid. And in 2005, inspired by the South African and Namibian anti-apartheid movement, Palestinians launched the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions BDS movement. Endorsed by the largest coalition in Palestinian society in Palestine and in forced exile, in 2005, the call says, "We, representatives of Palestinian civil society, call upon the international civil society organizations and people of conscience all over the world to impose broad boycotts and implement divestment initiatives against Israel similar to those applied to South Africa in the apartheid era. We appeal to you to pressure your respective states to impose embargoes and sanctions against Israel." Since then, the BDS movement was able to achieve significant impact that aims at isolating and holding accountable apartheid Israel. It has also globalized through action and education, including the Israel Apartheid Week annual event, to globalize the analysis of Israel as a settler colonial apartheid regime and what to do about it. This, along with the relentless work of Palestinian human rights organizations, has led to the widening of the apartheid analysis, especially among human rights organizations, and compelled organizations like Amnesty International, where I worked, to examine Israel's apartheid, which led to the publication of the report, which I co-authored, titled Israel's Apartheid Against Palestinians, Cruel System of Domination and Crime Against Humanity. The Amnesty report concludes that since its establishment in 1948, Israel has pursued a policy of establishing and maintaining a Jewish demographic hegemony and maximizing its control over land to the benefit of Jewish Israelis while restricting the rights of Palestinians and preventing Palestinian refugees from returning to their homes. In 1967, Israel extended this policy to the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which it has occupied ever since. Amnesty analyzed Israel's intent to create and maintain a system of oppression and domination over Palestinians and examined its key components, including territorial fragmentation, segregation and control, dispossession of land and property, and denial of economic and social rights. It has concluded that this system amounts to apartheid. It also documented unlawful acts committed by Israel against Palestinians with the intent to maintain this system, including forcible transfers, administrative detention and torture, unlawful killings, denial of basic rights and freedoms, and persecution. It has concluded that such acts form part of a systematic as well as widespread attack directed against the Palestinian population and amount to the crime against humanity of apartheid. Since Amnesty published this report, there has been today dozens of states, some making legal submissions to the International Court of Justice, that have addressed Israel as an apartheid state. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, African Union, Arab League, among others, have all condemned Israeli apartheid. Parliaments, unions, and civil society organizations in the thousands across the globe have addressed and committed to take action against Israel's apartheid. Capturing the moment, and despite the fragmentation that includes political fragmentations, Palestinians came together to make a consensus called the Unified Palestinian Call in 2022. In the consensus-based call, Palestinians define Israeli apartheid system as a tool of the Zionist settler colonial project in Palestine, which established the state of Israel on the ruins of Palestinian homeland and displaced most of the indigenous Arab Palestinian people during the Nakba of 1948, which started soon after the unjust partition decision of 1947. This project plans were implemented through the ethnic cleansing of the Arab population to consolidate Israel's settler colonial control over the largest possible area. The call demands and gives a program of action which this conference should consider. It calls on governments, parliaments, and political parties in the Arab world and globally to contribute to dismantling Israel's regime of settler colonialism and apartheid, starting with imposing a comprehensive military and security embargo on it, ending all commercial and financial agreements with it, and banning all products of companies complicit in its occupation, colonization, and apartheid. It also calls on all governments to treat the Israeli occupation's political, security, and military leaders as war criminals and tried them in their courts. It also calls on the people of the world and the democratic and progressive forces that uphold peace with justice to strengthen the growing global state of solidarity with the Palestinian people and our just cause by supporting and actively participating in the global Palestinian-led BDS movement. Let me cut, I had more to say, but to say that this call, the Palestinian Unified Call, cannot be more urgent now in the face of genocide. The brave South Africa move at the International Court of Justice provides the most strategic opportunity yet to elevate BDS, grow the movement, and finally defeat apartheid in Palestine and hopefully everywhere around the world. South Africa has heard us and taken our narrative and definitions to the World Court, same as millions around the world right now have heard the consensus-based calls, the 2005 BDS, 2022 Unified Palestinian Call, and are taking action. Today, we see an unprecedented surge in boycotts, divestments, and for the first time, we are beginning to see sanctions imposed on Israel. Let us grow this movement together. Let us make it a turning point. Put an end to the genocide and together end the decades of oppression, colonialism, and apartheid, and usher in the time of liberation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I've been asked by the conference organizers that we take a 20-minute break now for Jumu'ah. We are running a bit late, and we'll take a 20-minute break now and resume this panel in exactly 20 minutes. It's now 1:10. Please be back at 1:30. Thank you very much.